Good morning, everyone. Your morning weather briefing for this June 19th finds that there are no major changes in the forecast versus what I presented yesterday. Temperature and precipitation outlooks for this morning. We are going to be seeing the near-term heat moderating within the next couple of days, and an especially cool period for the middle of the country for around Thursday through very early next week. We'll be seeing temperatures then warming up again to easily above normal levels for late in the 6 to 10 day period, and especially in the 11 to 15 day time frame. My 6 to 10 day forecast has trended a little bit wetter today, and there should still be at least some additional modest rainfall chances in the 11 to 15 day time frame. QPF discussion for the 1 to 5 day time frame. Again, this morning, even with this forecast as wet as it is, I'm not going to post any major arguments against what is shown. This is a very wet pattern for the next 5 days, with a stationary front draped across the Corn Belt through much of that time frame, and a vigorous upper level disturbance moving along that stationary front that should give most of the Corn Belt significant or even heavy amounts of rainfall in this period. And that won't be the end of the rainfall chances, though. Additional rainfall is expected in the Corn Belt for the day 6 to 7 time frame. This forecast will be mainly based off of the GFS. The European model would have the bigger rains a little bit further north, but regardless, there should be some additional rains in the Corn Belt for at least the day 6 to 7 time frame. Looking at high temperatures yesterday, saw the heat pared back a little bit, but did still see a very warm day yesterday with 90-plus degree highs, especially across about the southern half to as much as two-thirds of the Corn Belt. Looking at rainfall over the last 24 hours, you can still see that a ridge of high pressure was still dominating a big portion of the Corn Belt during the last 24 hours. But to the north, there's still a lot of ring of fire rains across northern and northwestern portions of the Corn Belt with some locally significant or even heavy amounts. And you can see that based on radar estimated rainfall since 7 o'clock yesterday morning, especially portions of Iowa, Wisconsin, and into northern Illinois, seeing significant or even locally heavy rains during that period. Looking at the radar early on this Tuesday, still a ridge of high pressure dominating a good portion of the southern Corn Belt this morning, but to the north of there, more ring of fire rains still ongoing. Also seeing a little bit of tropical type moisture working into southern portions of the nation this morning as well. As far as the forecast is concerned, again, it is a situation where a frontal boundary and an upper level disturbance are going to be combining to be producing all of the rainfall in the Corn Belt in the near term. With regards to the frontal system that I'm talking about, there you can see it on the surface feature map that was valid as of a few hours ago. You can see that that frontal system is basically east-west oriented right across the central portion of the Corn Belt early on this Tuesday, and that is a frontal system that is not going to be moving a whole lot for the next several days as well. In addition to that frontal system, we are looking at an upper level system, a very distinctive and very strong upper level trough of low pressure. There you can see its position as of 7 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. That upper level disturbance is going to be moving right along that stationary front during the period in question. So when you combine those two factors together, we are still looking at significant or even heavy amounts of rainfall in the near term time frame. And there you can see from the Weather Prediction Center the areas that they believe are under at least slight risk for excessive rainfall for today, tomorrow, and also on Thursday. Would not be surprised to see some additional slight risks issued for Friday and Saturday of this week as well. As far as 1 to 5 day rainfall forecasts are concerned, again, very good model agreement from all of the models this morning, GFS output, Canadian output, and from the European output, that significant or even excessive rains are going to be seen across the Corn Belt during the next 5 days. Only extreme northern portion of the Corn Belt not looking at additional rainfall past 7 o'clock this morning of at least an inch. A big portion of the Corn Belt, but especially Ohio, Indiana, central and northern portion of Illinois, all but far northeastern Iowa, southern South Dakota, eastern Nebraska, northeastern Kansas, and northern Missouri. Those areas would all be looking at 5 day rainfall totals of 2 to 4 inches and some localized amounts of 4 to 6 inches, creating some localized flooding issues. Longer term, we are still looking at additional rains in the 6 to 10 day time frame, and as I mentioned earlier, my own 6 to 10 day forecast has trended wetter today with a bigger area of above normal rainfall across the Corn Belt for that time frame. What we're going to be seeing is some semblance of that east-west oriented frontal boundary still located in some portion of the Corn Belt for at least a portion of the 6 to 10 day time frame. And then look, as we get towards 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday, yet another distinctive trough of low pressure aloft is going going to be moving through the Corn Belt during that time frame. So once again, a combination of a weak frontal boundary and certainly an upper level system aloft moving through the Corn Belt are going to be key features behind, once again, significant rainfall in the Corn Belt for the 6 to 10 day time frame. Temperature-wise, still fairly hot conditions across the southern portion of the Corn Belt for this Tuesday. 90-plus degree heat going to be seen there. Certainly not as hot as in recent days, and that 90-plus degree heat is going to be covering a smaller portion of the Corn Belt than what we have seen since last Friday. The heat will continue to be pared back for tomorrow, and then a relatively cool period of weather going to be seen across a big portion of the middle of the country, but especially for the Plain States and for the Corn Belt for Thursday through the weekend, and possibly even for Monday, Tuesday of next week. Looking at temperature anomalies for Friday, you can see that there is going to be an extensive area of below or even localized much below normal temperatures covering most of the Corn Belt and a big portion of the Plain States by that time as well. It's going to be a relatively brief cool down there. Heat is going to be returning to the forecast for latter portion of the 6 to 10 day time frame. This is the temperature anomaly forecast for June 28th, the very end of the 6 to 10 day time frame, and you can see that by that time above normal temperatures have returned to most of the nation, and that should be warmth that is going to be continuing right through the 11 to 15 day time frame. Would think that temperatures would be running fairly easily above normal for a big portion of the nation for the 11 to 15 day period. Looking at the 500 millibar chart for the very end of the 11 to 15 day time frame for late in the day on July 3rd, you can see that all of the models suggest extensive areas of above normal heights covering a big portion of the nation by that time. So clearly a situation where it's not anything close to a cold weather pattern. And in fact, I would think that for much of the nation, temperatures would be running fairly easily above normal by that time frame. Would think that by that time frame that 90 plus degree temperatures in a big portion of the Corn Belt will once again not be an uncommon feature. Would it still be raining at that time? Well, it all kind of depends on which model you're looking at. Again, like yesterday, I think that it is the GFS model that would be most impressive on the heat and most impressive on some sort of a shutdown in rainfall. You can see that the 588 height line by that time is located well into northern portions of the nation, and with that being the case, I would think that most of the rain, if you believe the GFS model, would be to the north of the bulk of the Corn Belt region. But I still believe that the European ensemble is the better model. You can see that any sort of a dome of high pressure on that model would be more towards southern portions of the nation. The jet stream flowing over top of that modest dome of high pressure, I would think, would still keep some rainfall chances in the forecast for the Corn Belt even late in the 11 to 15 day time frame. Internationally this morning, still below normal rainfall going to be dominating Europe during the next 2 weeks. France in particular looking at largely no rainfall during the next 10 days. Over in the former Soviet Union, mostly below normal rainfall going to be seen there during the next 2 weeks. Any normal rainfall that is going to be seen located to the west of there, where western portions of Ukraine and areas to the north will see additional decent rains over the next 2 weeks. That is an area, of course, though, that saw good rains last week. If you're going to be seeing any sort of normal rainfall for the winter grain and summer row crop areas of Russia during the 2 week time frame, probably would be not until the 11 to 15 day period. For the spring grain areas of the former Soviet Union, still looking at fairly significant rainfall during the next 10 days at least. For the corn and soybean areas of China, a fairly wet forecast coming up for both Manchuria and also for the North China Plain. Looked at for the Manchurian corn and soybean areas, generally above normal rainfall there for the next 2 weeks, with that rainfall evenly distributed throughout the 2 week time frame. Forecast continues to trend wetter and wetter all the time for the North China Plain. For southern portion of the North China Plain, extensive and locally heavy rain going to be seen there over the next week, then much better rains moving into northern portion of the North China Plain for the week 2 time frame. Canadian prairies, they're looking at dry conditions for the rest of this work week period. Then rains will start to arrive for Saturday and throughout the 6 to 10 day time frame. Looks like that rain is going to be missing most of Manitoba, but some decent amounts going to be seen eventually in Saskatchewan, and some nice rainfall amounts by the end of the 10-day forecast in Alberta. Strictly a drier than normal weather pattern for Australian wheat areas for the next 2 weeks, so drought concerns, if anything, going to be increasing for the wheat areas of Australia during that time frame. And in India, looking at a revival in the Indian monsoon over the next 2 weeks, not as vigorous as we have seen at some points in time for this monsoon, but overall, pretty active monsoon for the next 2 weeks, looking at near to somewhat above normal rainfall across a big portion of the Indian subcontinent. That's what I have for your Tuesday. Everyone have themselves a great day.